Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 26th of December. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily with the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska or find us on Facebook and Twitter and social media at NWS Anchorage, NWS Juneau, or NWS Fairbanks. That's on Facebook and on Twitter and even on YouTube at times. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is an easy way to find me online. You're welcome to email me. I'll be happy to reply to you as quickly as I'm able to do so. It is my pleasure to serve you and make sure that you're staying informed with your weather and safety information around Alaska anytime I possibly can. Here's a look at what's going on across southeastern Alaska tonight. A winter storm watch being posted for the Haines and the Klondike Highway area. Generally, the highway itself, not for Haines just yet, but it looks like more wind and snow is coming in as we head through tonight and into the end of the week, including Friday. It does look like conditions will be changing once again for the higher terrain there. Typically, those levels are around about 1,000 feet or so this time of the year, and again we'll be watching for conditions to change. A little bit further up the road and up and around, that is, into the Thompson Pass area, we're also watching for the potential for wind and snow to really lower visibility here as we head into Friday. Blizzard conditions may develop right now, but we're calling this a winter storm watch, which means watch out, get ready. Thompson Pass driving conditions may be changing quickly as we head into tomorrow thanks to additional snow and blowing snow in the area. Up the road even further, we get into some of these yellow shaded areas, which does include the Denali National Park area and Healy. Wind chill advisories are posted for your area for a feels like index that could be anywhere from 45 to 55 below, all the way from tonight and into tomorrow, maybe even Saturday morning if the threat continues, and it certainly may. For areas along the eastern Alaska Range passes, cutoffs, and as you get up over the highway there, winter weather advisories are posted for you, and that means snow and blowing snow may reduce visibility to about a half mile or so. So driving conditions not the best in the eastern Alaska Range, on top of it just being rat nasty cold, of course. And across the upper Tanana Valley, wind chill advisories posted there for levels, again, that could be 45 to 55 below. Looking further north, we get into the red, the Brooks Range, as well as Arctic Village, all the way into the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys around Ambler. We're looking at wind chill warnings there, and that means the cold could feel like it is as cold as 60 to 65 below. And again, this will take us into at least Friday morning and probably Friday afternoon, and in some cases maybe even Saturday morning. The eastern Beaufort Seacoast and areas around Prudhoe Bay and Deadhorse also under a wind chill warning, which means, again, the levels there 55 to 65 below. When you get into that level of cold, as you well know if you're a worker of the slope, it takes 10 minutes or less to produce frostbite. Not to mention hypothermia, but frostbite itself can occur rapidly. So make sure you're limiting exposure. Make sure you know where the kids are. If you don't have to go out, this is the time to not go out, of course. When the wind is blowing and it's already cold, levels there from 30 to 50 below just on the thermometer, you add in just a touch of wind, the wind chill drops through the floor in a second. A wind chill advisory around Utqiagvik in the northern Arctic coast there, again, 45 to 55 below. For the lower Kobuk and Noatak valleys, all the way down to the Selawik Valley, Baldwin Peninsula, the interior of the Seward Peninsula, and northern areas around Shishmaref, and southern areas around Nome. The eastern sections of Norton Sound, including areas around Stebbins, Unalakleet, all the way down toward Hooper Bay and southwest, all under a wind chill advisory. Again, 45 to 55 below as we get into Friday morning and maybe even Saturday. The same goes for southwest. If you are moving in and around Bethel, if you're moving around southwestern Alaska, this means you as well. It is going to be very cold, probably the coldest night of the year so far, maybe the coldest night of the season that we'll see during this the next couple months here. And again, just a little bit of extra wind moving through southwest. It could feel like it's 45 to 55 below. Be careful. Check on your elders out there. Make sure that everyone you know is doing okay, that people are staying warm, that the house is buttoned up, and then stay inside, stay warm, keep the fire going. My goodness, it is going to be cold. Here's a look at the satellite picture here. This is going to be a very stormy pattern for the next 3 to 5, maybe even 7 days, especially from southeast to south central to southwest. And for areas north of that, it's just going to be cold. Here's a look at the pattern here. You can see low pressure working north and east. With that, it has already brought a lot of wind through southeast. Yesterday, high winds from Ketchikan all the way through the Panhandle were reaching into the 60 and 70 mile an hour range there. We had high wind warnings posted for a large number of folks in southeast. The wind threat is gone now, but hopefully not a whole lot of damage in your area from those gusts that move through. That's moving away. Already we have another low working its way north and east into the Gulf that is going to produce more wind and probably more snow, even for places like Kodiak. If you're in Kodiak, and it's been a while since you've seen a decent snowstorm, it's possible you're going to get some shovelable snow, maybe as much as 3 to 6 inches of snow if this low pressure system lines up just right for north and eastern parts of the island. So what does that mean? Well, if we have a low that's sitting right here next to Kodiak, that's probably going to really put down some wind and snow. Right now, it looks like there's a possibility that storm could set up a little bit more to the north and east of the island. If that's the case, it may still snow. You won't get a lot of wind with that, though. That's a better situation for you. But if you see a winter weather advisory or even a winter storm warning posted for the Kodiak area in the next 24 hours, that's what's going on. That's because that low is going to be very close to the island and turn out to be a pretty good position for a decent storm maker for the Kodiak Island area. Now, it does look like it will snow regardless, so plan on that. Will it be enough to shovel? We'll see, but let us know. As you look out into the central and northern parts of the interior, what you're picking up on is just a wealth of cold moving through. Temperatures across the interior have been anywhere from 20 to 30 below at least, in many other cases, in the valleys especially, just bitter cold, 40 to 50 below for places like Fort Yukon. Out across the west, you can see this long trail of cloud cover. That is the trough of low pressure that has several waves of low pressure along it. Each one of these keeps spinning up and moving back into the Gulf and has the potential of turning into a much more vigorous storm as it moves eastward toward southeast and the northern Gulf Coast. So here is just one round of that as we get into tonight and tomorrow. Low pressure across the northern Gulf hovering around 976 to 979 millibars. Pockets of rainfall in southeast right now. Much colder air right along and just south of the Alaska Range. It's working its way southward, so as we get into tonight, it will make its way into south central. It's already pouring into southwest. It's already been in the interior for days now. So all of this is still pushing southward. And that transition zone is where we're finding that very active weather that we had around southeast yesterday. We're also seeing that transition lineup here just south of the Aleutians. So we're getting snow across the chain into the southern parts of the Alaska Peninsula. As we get into tonight, you can see that wave's trying to creep northward just a little bit. The main impacts here along the Gulf will continue with rain and that winter storm watch again around the Haines and the Klondike Highway area. Low pressure sitting just outside of Prince William Sound. We've got the low for Kodiak now just east of the island, so this is just one of the model solutions, but if it's a little bit further east, it won't be quite so bad for Kodiak. So we've kind of trended this toward maybe worst case scenario if you're watching in Kodiak tonight. High pressure across the Brooks Range down into the western interior shows areas of ice fog. It'll be fairly widespread. And with the clouds clearing out across the interior, places like Fairbanks will probably look and trend toward worse air quality. So if you're one of those spots that doesn't have the greatest air quality in Fairbanks, you're going to lean that way as we start to break up the cloud cover tonight. One other factor across northern sections of St. Lawrence Island, Savunga, and Gamble, north of you, there's still plenty of marginal ice out there. And with some open water, certainly more than is usual this time of the year, and strong and cold winds pouring southward, heavy freezing spray in the area might be a problem for Gamble and Savunga. So keep watch on that if you're in the area. If you can do something to limit your exposure to any freezing spray that might be coming off the open water tonight, that would be very wise. Out across the west, pockets of snow and wind across the central and eastern chain, rain for the Gulf, and just bitter cold, and watch for blowing snow again around Thompson Pass. Wind chill advisory is likely still in effect for many locations as we head into Saturday. That cold area of high pressure across the north still pumping its Arctic blast into south and western Alaska. Snow showers along the boundary there for the coast, but primarily dry. It won't amount to much. The main active zone of weather will be here across the chain, that tight pressure pattern here showing up in the packing of the isobars. There will be a lot of wind whipping across the chain. Low pressure in the Gulf again, setting up for snow around coastal areas, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, all the way into south central with another wave working through the Anchorage area. And rain and snow for parts of southeast. Again, the Klondike Highway setting up to see more snow working up toward Haines and Skagway. A lot going on there, and most of it due to tremendous cold. Probably, again, the coldest period of our season to come. Here's a look at those temperatures. Friday morning through Saturday. Here we go. 50 below or more around Arctic Village to Fort Yukon and west to the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, the north slope. The worst of it east of Utqiagvik toward Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, all the way to AKwx, Kotzebue Sound. Looking at temps around 20 below for Kotzebue, 13 below for Nome, 25 below in Bethel and 40 below in McGrath, 50 below around Galena. Keep in mind, these are air temperatures, not the wind chill factor that we're showing at all. So it's worse when you factor in the wind. 30s around southeast, south central single digits or colder, 15 around Kodiak, 20s and 30s out in the west. A high of 21 in St. Paul on Friday, 11 below in Nome, 18 below for AKwx, 50 below or close to it around Ambler, Bettles out toward Fort Yukon, 30 below in Fairbanks, single digits for south central and southeast in the 30s and 40s. Overnight lows Saturday morning again back to 50 below or worse, 60 below possible around Arctic Village. Certainly still cold in the Arctic coast. Bristol Bay temperatures 5 to 15 below southeast, mid 30s to about 40, 22 in Kodiak, 0 in Anchorage, and again, not much warmer on Saturday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your aviation weather now. IFR concerns will linger across the upper Yukon down into the upper Tanana Valley, generally east of Isabel Pass and all the way out through Tenita and likely Mentasta Pass to get us started tomorrow morning. North of Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass and any of your Brooks Range passes, you'll run into considerably more MVFR and IFR across the North Slope tomorrow. Most of the west coast, most of the interior should be VFR. You'll see marginal conditions out over the Barrens and east and over Lake Iliamna and occasionally over northern ends of Kodiak Island. This will be changing quite a bit. Out across the west, widespread marginal concerns with IFR pushing into the Aleutians. Look for higher terrain IFR across places like Hyder all the way up through the Lynn Canal, Haines, Skagway, perhaps at times around Gustavus and the capital city as well. By the afternoon, that's going to fill in very, very quickly. So IFR moving into all of southeast conditions will be going down rapidly throughout the daytime. Watch for IFR around some of your areas in the Copper River Valley east of Tenita Pass especially. The North Slope concerns will linger there. No big change there. Coastal areas may be a little bit more on the marginal side than IFR, but if you're trying to get through the passes, that's still going to be problematic. Marginal conditions around most of the coastal communities right along the shore. Inland, you should be okay. VFR is expected to be fairly widespread, and then no big change out across the Bering Sea. St. Paul and St. George at times marginal to IFR, but you'll notice right here by the afternoon expect to be mainly marginal concerns. Kodiak Island, south and west towards Sand Point, also looking to be IFR, all wrapped up around that area of low pressure that's still moving eastward by Saturday morning. No big change for southeast or most areas east of Cordova into Delta Junction or Gulkana and Glen Allen. Areas to the west as you get up toward Fairbanks should start to see a rapid improvement to VFR. Conditions on the North Slope improve, but coastal areas will still be looking at marginal concerns. IFR from St. Lawrence Island southward toward the Pribilofs, a little bit of improvement as you head there, and MVFR at least in parts of Bristol Bay and maybe the southwestern Capes, and also IFR south of Kodiak. That moves back in by Saturday afternoon. Southeast goes back down to IFR. No big change across the upper Tanana or the upper Yukon Valley. As you get up across the North Slope, IFR sinks back in, and this time covering up Wainwright, Utqiagvik, all the way down toward Point Hope and Point Lay, and east toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, with not quite making it all the way out toward Kaktovik. And then again, the Bering Strait, the Bering Sea, I should say, hovers under marginal concerns. Here's your pass conditions in detail. Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass likely hold at marginal levels throughout most of your Friday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, probably VFR all day long. A little bit of a change perhaps late in the day is possible. Rainy Pass looks to be VFR. Windy Pass looks to be VFR, but as you get into Isabel Pass, we start creeping in on that stuff we saw in the eastern interior, and that's where we get into Isabel looking at marginal levels. Mentasta Pass probably starts at IFR and then pushes over to marginal levels as we go. Tenita Pass looks to be marginal, pushing over toward VFR as the day goes on. Portage Pass looks to be okay, but on the eastern side, it does look like marginal concerns will be creeping in there, so if that changes your plans, at least know that stuff in Prince William Sound will be leaning over toward marginal levels, and Chilkoot and White Pass expected to be IFR most of the day. Obviously, cold is the big story for the interior and the west, especially southwest. A lot of changes there in the coming days or so. You can see the elevated warmth is pushing southward, so everywhere really in the mainland's below freezing. Surface freezing line hovering just south of the capital city, Cross Sound to Yakutat, Prince William Sound, and then well south of the Alaska Peninsula out toward the eastern chain for Friday morning. Icing potential is changing as well. Areas around the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula will have levels above 2,000 to about 8,000 feet that could experience isolated moderate. Some of that could be reaching into the Pribilofs below 5,000 feet up toward Prince William Sound above 2,000 feet, and from southeast around Haines and Skagway below 4,000 feet to above 3,000 feet around Ketchikan, Annette, and Hyder, all the way down toward Haida Gawai. The only concern for considerable moderate right now seems to be around the Alaska Peninsula, and those regions there will generally be above 2,000 feet, where moisture is collecting along a front and that low pressure trough that's working its way northward. The jet stream right now has high pressure sitting across the eastern Pacific, a huge trough across western North America, and another one here moving into the western parts of the Gulf of Alaska. Wind speeds there around 145 knots, sending a tremendous amount of air northward into the Gulf, but it's meeting up with a lot of cold Arctic air spilling southward into the Bering. So our main weather pattern is pretty unsettled, to say the least. Low pressure from Kodiak Island southward keeps a south and southwesterly flow moving into southeast. The mainland, though, experiencing that driving north wind, 40 to 50 knots coming through the Bering Strait. Northwesterlies on the north slope, 25 to 30 there. The pattern's similar at 3,000 feet. Our trough sits across the north and western Gulf. Strong southeasterly winds are going to be on the north side of this low pressure system in the Gulf, so watch for considerable moderate below 4 to 6,000 feet and isolated severe in the west.
Remember last week when we found the shared star Alpheratz in Andromeda? Knowing Alpheratz makes it easy to star hop to the Andromeda galaxy, the most distant object that we can see with our bare eyes. So here's Alpheratz in the western sky at 11 p.m. Remember, it's the meeting point of the Great Square of Pegasus and Andromeda. From there, look for Merak and Mu, the second pair of stars along Andromeda's spike. From those two stars, draw a short line, and bam! That fuzzy-looking spot is Galaxy M31 Andromeda, and it's even better with binoculars. The Andromeda Galaxy is the closest large spiral galaxy to us here in the Milky Way, and it's 40% larger. And in about 4 billion years, Andromeda and the Milky Way are gonna collide. But don't worry, galaxies are mostly empty space. So just keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and we have a special guest in the studio today. We welcome Amanda Terborg of the Aviation Weather Center. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Amanda's flown in all the way from Kansas City, and for those of you that don't know, the Aviation Weather Center serves the lower 48 for aviators, just as the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit here in Anchorage serves all of Alaska. So I kind of wonder, what's the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City doing to help out Alaska, Amanda?
Yeah, you know, we do a lot of collaboration work with our sister station up here. Lately, we've been doing a lot of work, especially in the satellite meteorology.
Okay.
In particular, we have been looking at ways to better identify icing conditions in clouds, which is a big deal up here because, as I'm coming to find out, even though I'm not from here, you guys have a lot of pilots here.
We have a lot of pilots. In fact, when you say you can't get there from here, that's how you get there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so with icing potential then, what's Kansas City working on?
Well, we are working on something that will help us, again, identify the icing in the clouds. You don't want ice on your aircraft.
No.
Not only does it add a whole bunch of extra weight to your airframe when it attaches to the wings and the nose cone, but it can also mess with your aerodynamics.
Right.
And in the most serious conditions, that can mess with it enough that you can actually crash.
It changes the shape of the wing, and that makes it sometimes impossible to fly, right?
It does, yeah. So we want to figure out a way to better forecast for that.
Makes sense.
Now this particular image is over Alaska. The colors here are a little goofy. It doesn't look like your run-of-the-mill satellite image.
Okay.
But the red is where you have liquid clouds and the blue is ice. But again, it really doesn't tell you a lot where you have icing conditions in that cloud. Because in those clouds there's little droplets and they're cold and they're actually below freezing, but they're still liquid, and that makes them sticky.
Okay.
So when an aircraft flies through there, those droplets are sticking to the aircraft, and it can happen amazingly fast.
Right.
And so that's what we're trying to find. And there is a product called the Aircraft Flight Icing Threat that does this. And it's basically looking at the temperature of the cloud, and it's also looking at the size of the droplets to identify a probability and intensity of those icing conditions.
Okay.
And if you flip to the next image, this is a case from Juneau, Alaska, where this probably wouldn't have been the best day to fly around Juneau.
Okay.
Now there was an area of moisture that pushed south from the southwest up along the coast that pushed in a stratus layer, and in the stratus layer there was a lot of those super cooled liquid drops, or a lot of stickiness.
Okay.
And so the flight icing threat was able to, in the pinks and the reds there, was able to identify where that icing was. Now this is really cool. You know, it's really cool to be able to identify that. There is, you know, of course, caveats to every product. Much as we wish it would it would happen. Sun doesn't shine all the time, unless, I guess, if you live in northern Alaska during the summertime.
Right.
But we need that sun to be able to bounce off those clouds and to be able to see where those super cool drops are.
Okay, so it's a daytime only tool.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, of course, you know, we're in the era of advanced satellite technology, and there is a satellite that can actually use moonlight to see clouds.
Yes.
And so sometime in the future, we hope to be able to do that.
Okay.
Another thing that is a bit of a challenge is multiple layers of clouds. You know, you can only see so far through a thick cloud.
Okay.
And if it's thick enough, sometimes you can't see a layer of icing that's below there.
Right.
But even besides those caveats, this product has a lot of potential to help out Alaskan aviators here.
Well, it sounds like a really big deal, and something that forecasters at the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit could use probably on a daily basis, and especially in the middle of a really big storm.
Yeah, I would think so.
Do you have a really good success story in the lower 48 using this tool?
You know, it's a fairly new product, and so we're still evaluating it. But yeah, we have had a lot of cases where we have seen that it does tend to capture those icing conditions.
Okay, very good. Well, Amanda, thanks so much for sharing some of the very interesting satellite imagery and the tools that you're using there at the Aviation Weather Center in Kansas City with us here in Alaska. People can probably find some of this information online, right?
Yeah, here is a website here. It's a page from NASA Langley, and they have this imagery as well as a bunch of other satellite imagery that you can take a look at.
Okay, great. And I'm sure our friends at the Alaska Aviation Weather Center and the unit will be using that in the coming months there with your training and your help there to learn more about that tool to help Alaska aviators any day of the year. That's wonderful stuff. So thanks again for joining us, Amanda, and we welcome you to view any of our Alaska weather facts on YouTube anytime at the address below, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your ice edge now. Note the area of generally open water north of Gamble and Savunga, St. Lawrence Island there. There is some marginal ice located north of the island, but not enough to really seal up the entire concentrated area there north of the island itself. The problem then is the amount of cold air and open water together means heavy freezing spray could be an issue generally for anything north of the island and maybe onto the island. Not a lock on that just yet, but certainly something to keep mind of as the weather pattern looks to be somewhat similar for the next couple of days. A lot of north winds and a lot of cold working over open water north of St. Lawrence Island. We're also seeing the ice edge move quickly to the south, maybe as much as 45 to 60 nautical miles in the next couple of days, each day, that is. So a lot of movement for the ice edge, which is good news for the area north of St. Lawrence Island. More information there anytime at weather.gov/anchorage/ice from the Alaska Sea Ice Program. For Friday in southeast, look for a driving southeasterly wind coming up the inside passage, 25 to 30 knots with 5 to 8 foot seas there, 35 to 40 knot winds across the outer coast, seas ranging from 16 to 19 feet. And as we get into Saturday, you can see winds still holding around 25 to 30 knots, most areas looking at 16 to 19 foot seas outside of Yakutat. A little bit more of a southwesterly push there north of Cape Fairweather. And then southeasterlies as you get to the inside passage, those diminish just a little bit, 15 to 25. Expect about 3 to 9 foot seas on the inside, the highest of which will be in the Clarence Strait region there on Saturday. In Prince William Sound, northwesterlies driving in at 25 knots with a 4 foot sea. East and northeasterly winds across the north and western Gulf, 30 knots with 7 to 9 foot seas, and much stronger winds south of Kenai toward Clam Gulch and Bay, Kachemak Bay, 40 knot winds there, 13 to 17 footers coming down into Shelikof Strait. We'll see that in just a minute. As we get into Saturday, winds diminish in all areas, a little bit of a southerly flow coming up toward Kenai, but northwesterlies continue across the Barrens at 25 to 35 knots. Southwesterlies strengthening outside of Prince William Sound and inside 30 knots with a 6 foot sea on Saturday. For Friday, inside of Shelikof Strait, there's that northeast wind at 35 knots with a 13 foot sea. 10 to 21 foot seas coming down the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula and South Vakiak all the way to Sand Point. You're looking at much higher seas as you move southward. Bristol Bay to the Bering Sea coast, 35 to 40 knot winds, 9 to 15 foot seas there on Friday. By Saturday, winds and seas diminish a little bit. You're still looking at northerlies going hard at 30 knots. 25 knots to all the way from Shelikof Strait down to Sand Point on Saturday, expecting 6 to 14 foot seas, the highest of which, of course, will be on the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula, and westerlies blowing off of Kodiak Island at 20 knots, 14 foot seas out into the Gulf. Now, for the Aleutians, much stronger winds here and much colder weather. Northeasterlies steady at 40 to 45, storm force winds in some cases anywhere from 20 to 24 knots on the Bering Sea coast, 26 footers south of the Aleutians. Again, all of this close to the coastal waters. As we get into Saturday, you can see the strongest winds and highest seas move to the west. So from Adak and Atka all the way out toward Kiska and Shemya, you're looking at 35 to maybe 45 knots in some cases. 21 to 24 foot seas there. To the east, Nikolsky and Unalaska get a little bit of a break. 25 to 30 knot winds south of Nikolsky. It could be 35. Anywhere from 15 to 16 foot seas in the region for Saturday. For the west coast, north and easterly winds, again, much colder weather. You can see the ice extent getting closer to the eastern end of St. Lawrence Island into the Kuskokwim Delta and parts of southwest. 35 to 40 knot winds sustained for most areas. The Bering Strait region, 25 knots and a 9-foot sea. 13-foot seas around St. Matthews, 17-footers around St. Paul and St. George. All of that improves a little bit on Saturday. Not much. 30 to 40 knot winds, though, for most areas continue. 11 to 15-foot seas all the way out towards St. Matthew, including Macoriac and into the Kuskokwim Delta region. 25 knots over the ice there in Norton Sound. For the Beaufort Sea coast, 10 to 20 knot winds from the north and west. Northerlies coming down into the Chukchi, the Bering Strait region again. Northeasterlies 25 with 9-foot seas, 35 knots and 11-foot seas there on Saturday. And a north and westerly wind continues across the northwest coast with a west and southwesterly flow strengthening to 20 knots on Saturday. It is going to be cold, friends. Wind chill advisories and warnings are posted. If you are under a wind chill warning, that means it could feel as cold as 55 to 65 below. If you're under an advisory, that means 45 to about 55 below. Air temperatures are not included in that. That is what it could feel like to your skin. We have a winter storm watch posted for the Klondike Highway region that'll start up late tonight into tomorrow. And for the Thompson Pass area for blowing and drifting snow could be possible as we go through your Friday. Winter weather advisories for the eastern Alaska range. High pressure up north means continued bitter cold as we head into the weekend with more snow on the way for south central, southwest, and southeast.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.